of the lessons I learned while I was at Rhodes was from one of my favorite law professors, Professor Midgley, who in first year tried to explain to us a little bit of Latin, which one always drops into conversation, contra bonus mores, which is a really pretentious way of saying public policy or trying to ask what is the dominant moral viewpoint on something. And Prof. Midgley told us in first year, which is when I decided, okay, I won't be a lawyer, philosophers do the serious thinking, that when judges talk about contra bonus mores, it really just depends on what they had for breakfast. And the same goes for many political terms, including liberalism. And so I thought a good starting point for my critique of liberals in South Africa is probably to make clear what I mean by the term and to give you a definition of it. So how many of you know what liberalism means? Anyone have a definition? A liberal is someone who writes a strongly worded letter. And as someone who wrote a strongly worded open letter to the editor of City Press, I guess that makes me a hardcore liberal. I think a liberal really is probably best defined as someone who, in the most minimal possible sense, someone who takes very seriously certain core freedoms that we have. Individual rights, the value of autonomy, and protecting all of that from the tyranny of a majority opinion. That is, at its core, what liberalism is about. You can try and be more academic about it, quote a little bit of Rousseau or John Stuart Mill, but at its core, it really is about the value of autonomy and freedom and making sure that we only step in to protect people from those who want to harm them, but beyond that, giving them maximum space. And a lot of South Africans would like to believe that they are liberal. The academy in South Africa, especially traditional English universities like Rhodes University, a lot of the academics here self-identify as liberal. The media that doesn't always deliver you good news are full of journalists who imagine that they are progressive or liberal. And I want to ask, how committed are these self-identifying liberals to the liberal project? And the answer is not very much. We should redefine liberalism as someone who doesn't have a backbone but who can write a strongly worded letter. Because that's exactly what we recently saw during the debacle around the spear. All of you know an artist, Brett Murray. I don't know if he exists. He seems to be as mythical as the Loch Ness Monster. And if he didn't exist, perhaps the ANC would have had to invent him this year as a rallying point around the victim that is President Jacob Zuma. Be that as it may, all of you will recall Brett Murray depicting an image of Jacob Zuma, or what he imagines Jacob Zuma's genitalia look like, and that has resulted in one of the most interesting news stories of the year. There are a lot of interesting different tensions that came out of this spear debate, but one of them that fascinated me philosophically was that one of the subtexts behind the public debate is disagreement between liberals and conservatives about what dignity means, what decency is, what the limits are of artistic freedom in our society. Those were one of the big questions that came out of the whole spear debacle. And now that emotions have calmed down, we have a chance to reflect on what happened and how that debate panned out. And I must say, not very well for democracy. And I could have probably given a more earnest title to this talk, and then it would have been something to the effect of the value of deep disagreement. Because what happened, and this is the idea worth selling, and then you can go to lunch and not listen to the rest of the talk, is that we lost an opportunity to entrench deep disagreement as a feature of a deliberative democracy. That, for me, was one of the biggest tragedies of how that debate played out. When we had conservatives punting their views in the public, toy-toying in front of the Goodman Gallery, toy-toying outside the court, when you had an older black lawyer who couldn't make the argument for why dignity was being impaired, rather resorting to tears in the hope that that will win over the judges, what we suddenly found was that the liberals retreated. And that's the sense in which liberals don't have a backbone. You have one columnist, let's call him Justice Malala for argument's sake, writing in the Sunday Times about how he understands the way in which the black body was used historically as part of anti-black discrimination. Lo and behold, you suddenly get liberals crying in tears and saying, now I understand. Thank goodness I bought the Sunday Times yesterday. Let me take down the image from my newspaper's website, because Justice Malala has made me understand what Gwede Mantashe is on about when he says that Brett Murray has really overstepped the moral bounds of artistic freedom. Well, no, that's not actually what's going on. What's really going on is that you being cowardly as a liberal to retreat from your position. And what we lost in that moment was the opportunity to rid ourselves as South Africa of the tag being a fragile democracy. We're only going to become a robust democracy if we start rehearsing what a robust democracy involves. And what it involves is disagreeing with one another openly. And we missed that opportunity because liberals were the first to retreat, as they always are, being scared. And I think there are three important insights there that are worth taking away, which are really the three thoughts I want to leave you with. The first was that what happened in that retreat is that we saw a fantastic rehearsal of what would make Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, turn in his grave. Inauthentic behavior. Put in simple English, lies. You didn't get the tears. You were just scared of the tears. That's why the liberals were retreating. I think one or two liberals were perhaps sincere, but I think many liberals were simply scared. They were simply scared to disagree openly, and that means that we have inauthentic engagement because we retreat. I had one gentleman saying to me, Eusebius, we weren't scared. I understand, there was a white South African in his late 50s, I understand where the tears come from. I'm not scared of black people. The only black person I'm scared of is my black wife. Thought, okay, dude, you obviously want brownie points for being in an interracial marriage. Fine. Great liberal that you are, probably a Rhodes graduate, you know. Where, by the way, Megan, white chicks can be barefoot and have a cheese cop and be mainstream. It takes more to be unique here. So the first problem with the liberal retreat in our public debate is inauthenticity. The second problem is that it's actually deeply condescending. And I'm really sorry if I'm going to be hurting some liberal souls with this remark. But I think if you do some real self-examination, you would find that the operating motive, not the stated reason, the operating motive why many liberals retreat is because they are scared of a bunch of toy-toying young black people. And you've got to ask yourself why. It's deep condescension, sometimes mixed with latent racism. If you are a liberal and you come across a conservative Afrikaans, white South African, you might try your luck and persuade them, or at the very least, put the argument as to why they are wrong. But lo and behold, if you see a toy-toying, 25-year-old, angry-looking black South African, you dare not extend to them the same courtesy that they are susceptible to dialogue. So the second problem with the liberal critique is it actually exposes deeply condescending assumptions about the ability of other South Africans to hear you out and to be persuaded. And that doesn't say much for empathy for people who have historic memories that are really full of wounds. It actually says a hell of a lot more about you and your assumptions about fellow South Africans. And the final important issue is we've got to ask ourselves, what is the litmus test of being in a democracy? We are here in a talk that is themed Africa-inspired. And in order to inspire ourselves to be the best possible post-colonial democracies that we can be, we must strive not to sing Kumbaya together, but rather to openly disagree deeply and still be able to go to the Rat and Parrot for a beer. Thank you.